Welcome to the Homeschool High School Podcast, brought to you by Seven Sisters Homeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. I'm Vicki, and today we're going to talk about a fun project for the week after Christmas. All right, so this is a quick 1 week project that your homeschool high schoolers can do or at kind of together as a group family project. So however you want to handle it, but it's a short story project that can turn into kind of a as big a project as you want, but a short story if you want to have it in that form. And so it's literally we call it a family narrative or a family short story. And this is how you do it. Okay, you ready? So, at Christmas time, if you're getting together with family, usually people will sit around the table and tell about the time when Uncle Joe did this when he was 12 years old, or do you remember the time when the great grandparents did so and so? Or so people will tell family stories. Sometimes families get into the habit of not telling those old stories, and they'll be complaining about the news, or what Aunt Sally was wearing at church last Sunday, and so it might be a good idea to have on hand that at Christmas time when everybody's getting together, you may want to redirect to some uncomfortable conversations over towards something that would be more fun. Like, let's tell some family stories, even the family stories that you have heard a million times. So so every family has some of those stories that they will tell over and over again. So can you remember any of them? So I know in our family narrative guide that's not for holidays. Now, Seven Sisters has two family narrative guides. They're both very inexpensive 1 week projects. And what you do is in a family narrative, you just take a general family story. And in the holiday family narratives, you could pick a Christmas story or just whatever kind of family stories come up. And but you're using the holidays as an excuse to capture that story down in paper. Um, so anyway, think about right now, like think about a family story that you know. So in our Seven Sisters family narrative guide, I share with the students a family story of my great grandmother. And so I'll tell you that one here in case you haven't heard it. I tend to tell the same stories all the time. So my great grandmother lived in Louisville, Kentucky, outside, in the farmland around the town. And we're talking in the early days of the Model T Fords. So in her little neck of the woods, they were outside of the town. And so everybody's telephones were connected. Yeah, I'm sure your young people, or you at least, may have heard of party lines, where if the telephone line goes down, from house to house to house, everybody's on the same line. So if you wanted to be nosy, you could pick it up and listen in on the conversation of other folks that are on the line. And everybody would have their own unique ring, so you'd know whether a call coming in was for your house or their house. So anyway, so my grandmother, my great grandmother, saved up money. She saved and she saved and she scraped together and she bought herself a Model T Ford. Well, I tell you what, that was the biggest deal in that town. I mean, they were all the neighbors, all the little farms around where she lived on her farm. They were so excited, and everybody wanted to see that Model T Ford, and she was excited to drive it. So it was delivered to her house out there, way in the farm, way out in the boonies. And she was going to drive it to town just for practice and then turn around and drive back. All right. So what happened was then is everybody's on their party lines and everybody's watching for my great grandmother. She gets in her little Model T Ford and she drives from her house past the next house, and the next house, the neighbors pick up the phone and said, she just went by. And so everybody's on the party line waiting, and so if the house next to them would know, okay, now it's time to go out and watch because the Model T Ford is going to go past their house. And so it would go past the next house and they'd pick up the phone and say, she just went past here all the way into Louisville. and then all the way back. She's on her way home, just past here. So everyone on the party line, all the way till they got back home. So that was like everybody was involved. So then her husband then he wanted a chance to drive the car. So he climbs into the Model T and he drives, and all the neighbors are excited. It goes down the party line, and he turns around and comes back, and it goes back up the party line. And then, he's never driven a Model T Ford before. He's always driven his horses. So they're going to park this Model T in the barn. And, when he gets in the barn with his horses, he would say, whoa, and the horses would stop. And then he could unhitch them and put them in their stalls and all that, so horses were very obedient. So when he got into the Model T Ford into the barn, he told the Model T to whoa, whoa, he said. And the Model T didn't stop. And he said, whoa, I say. And the Model T didn't stop. And it just went right into the back wall of the barn. And so anyway, that's one of our favorite family stories from my great grandmother's time. So, and it's endured generation to generation because it's just so cute and so just special to that time period in history. So part of the project then is you get your teens to pry stories out of the relatives. Tell me a time that you guys went on a trip. Tell me a time where my parents, my dad or my mom got in trouble when they were a kid. Tell me a time where something exciting happened when everybody was at church. So give them a few prompts if they are out of the habit of telling stories, and see if you can get a story. Okay. So once you get the basic outline of a story, you got some details, maybe ask a few more questions, see if you get the family involved, like what kind of clothes did you wear in those days? What color was the Model T? So just ask some questions and kind of drag all the information out that you can. Then the week after Christmas, you get out your holiday family narrative guide from Seven Sisters Homeschool, and you work through the process day to day, each day. It will help a student, your teens, to turn the story they heard into a story on paper. So they will include some character development. They'll describe the family members, tell a little bit about their personality. So the guide will kind of take them through that process. The guide will help them develop the storyline, how to capture this came first, this came next, to how to throw in a little bit of simple dialogue, and how to make sure the whole thing is fitting into the mood of the story. So like when my great grandmother was driving the Model T Ford for the first time, and then her husband drives it into the back of the barn, that could have been a frustrating story, scary story. Everybody's nervous, is she going to drive? Everybody's mad because the car hit the barn. But no, it's a fun story. It's a silly story. It's a old-fashioned Southern delightful story. And so to have the mood captured in the right wording, and so the guide takes students through that. Then once they get through with their story, then they can turn it into something that they want to keep. And in fact, maybe even want to make copies for the relatives so they can bind it in some way. So just stapling it in the corner, maybe that's why I put it in a report folder, from the local office supply. Take it down to the local copy shop and let them bind it for you. Or some people have their own binders at home. It would be great to make some copies of photos, old family photos from that time period, and put those pictures in the story. If the teens want to upload it onto one of those websites that'll make little family scrapbooks, you can send it that way and put pictures and the story in a kind of more scrapbook form. So make it in a form that if you wanted to make copies and share it with the family, it would be a good thing. And then before actually bind it, is make sure the teens do their editing. So, if you're going to share it with the relatives, you want to make sure this copy is edited well. So we like our teens to edit anyway. You have a rough draft and a final draft. This is a good one to let somebody else read over it or run it through Grammarly, so that you have a good pair of eyes to make sure that later on you don't find that, you misspelled somebody's name, or, just did something goofy that you don't want there. Okay. All right. And then you could take it to the either the online like source, or to a local copy shop, or make your own kind of cover and binding, and then you've got your own copy, and you can make other copies also. If you want to have the teens go on Canva or PicMonkey and actually make a real cover for it too, and with collages, of photos, or some kind of a graphic that would be cute, like I could put a graphic that I find a free graphic, so like Canva and PicMonkey and other places like that have some free photos you can use. Sometimes some of the other supply places have free photos that you can get. So you make your own graphic and throw that in as a cover, or scattered here and there if you don't have enough photos in like your family photo collection. So you put it all together, and then you've got a really cool keepsake and something that made a great project. Now, how does that advance the academics? All right, this is really important. It does advance the academics. It does. Because one thing is, teens need all kinds of writing. They need to do a lot of writing in their homeschool high school years. So sometimes we think about, they definitely need to write a research paper. They need to write a bunch of essays. And those things are okay, those are really important. But they also can be very boring. And here's a project that's not boring, but any writing at all is improving writing skills overall. And the more fun writing teens do, the more likely they're going to take some of that creativity and word usage and good thinking and positive attitude into their research papers and into their essays, so that those things become more quality. So any kind of writing your teens do makes better writing on the serious writing. Does that make sense? And so I know for our homeschool high schoolers, we required at least one research paper every year in high school. They had a certain number of essays according to what level they were working at, that they would do. But we also required they do some short story and some poetry. Sorry. And so they would do things like this for some of it. Okay. Well, that will wrap up what we're going to do today. Welcome to a new year. Have a great, great rest of the school year. We'll see you next week.